Any good personal, paranormal, or cryptid stories? 17. Worked the graveyard shift at McDonald's from midnight to 6 a.m. in the summer. It's mostly dead around this time, and usually the second shift people already did most of the cleanup. This time of night, we usually only sold nuggets, burgers, and drinks to the late night customers. Lobby closes, though, until 6 a.m. Be shooting the shit with my shift manager, Josh. Josh is a total bro. A few years older, and generally didn't give a fuck about most things. He stops and asks, "Hey Anon, didn't Donna leave like an hour ago?" I ask him why. Says he thought he saw someone out of the corner of his eye in the dish pit that's right next to the back booth. Tell him that yeah, she did. I saw her leave. For context, Donna was this older lady who worked the late nights. She was usually off at midnight and out of the store by 12:10. Look over to the dish pit. Hear what sounds like someone walking around back there. Me and Josh book it to the back booth. Nobody. Our back booth only leads to one other place, and that's the crew room. Nobody there. From then on, we were both convinced the store was haunted. Be living in a pretty rural area of New England at the time. Joyriding in my coworker and buddy's truck. It's about 11:30 when we're about 10 minutes from our neighboring town, having cruised around there most of the day. We pull over because my buddy has to piss. We pull into this dirt trail so he can hop out, pee, and get back in. When we're pulling out, suddenly this loud thumping-like noise can be heard. Suddenly we both see this huge, tall thing run fast across the trail and be gone just as fast. Be 9 years old, visiting my dad's house on the weekend in the middle of nowhere town, Nebraska. His house is an L-shaped single-story home. Bedrooms down the long hallway. Living room and kitchen at the other end. My room is at the end of the hallway. My dad's is across it. It's 2 p.m., and I'm bored of playing banjo and kazooie. Open my door to go see what my dad is doing in his room. He's taking a nap. Decide to go get a snack and run down the hallway towards the kitchen, looking down at my feet as I run. Make it like 10 feet before I look up. Heart stops. My body freezes. Hair is standing on its ends. A fear unlike anything I've experienced rushes through my body. I see a slender green face looking at me, with one long black eye, its long fingers wrapped around the corner. Same sight as from communion. A second later, it disappears around the corner towards the kitchen on the right. After the fear washes over, I immediately run the next 15 feet down the hall and turn. Absolutely nothing. I ran back to my room and only came out when my dad woke up. I hadn't seen communion until college, and when that scene happened, I nearly shit my pants reliving the memory. Never seen it since. My son, junior in high school at the time, was visiting his buddy on the outskirts of town. They own a farm, quasi-rural part of Utah. It was about 9:10 p.m., and something was making noise outside. The dad was afraid a skunk or something was messing with his chickens. He grabs a flashlight and a shotgun and heads out. After the dad exited the house, my son and his buddy decided to follow him. A barn was about 200 feet away, and the dad was beelining through a field towards it. Son and friend were trailing about 100 feet behind. The dad enters the barn. Son and friend are trudging through the field to get closer. Next thing you know, my son hears a scream escape from the barn, and then a shotgun blast. The dad comes barreling out of the barn, sees my son and his kid, and screams for them to run back into the house. They all get in the house, and the dad is shaken up. He calls 911 and explains that he needs the cops to come check the barn. The dad sat shaking at the dinner table, and my son and his friend sat down and asked what happened. The dad said when he got into the barn, something was just off, and then a smell hit him, but he kept moving toward the back. This barn had rafters and holding pens for animals on either side. Well, he was scanning with the flashlight, and then shined the light towards the back and he saw it. This lengthy white man or creature had its back to him. Its skin was ash white, and he knew it was off because he said a long white arm reached up and was hanging over one of the rafters. It was leaning forward and the head was hanging down, but that's when it cocked its head and twisted like an owl to face him straight on, looking at him from below the armpit on an elongated neck. Then he freaked out and fired. During the story, he was checking the windows as they waited for the cops. Cops didn't show. My son said that unmarked black vans appeared. A helicopter crested the ridge and landed in the field. Military-geared men exited the vans. Another van had men in hazmat suits escorted by the military-geared men toward the barn. The thing, creature, man had escaped out of the back. There was literal white goo that was on parts of the barn where the shot caused a splatter. The helicopter and vans were on the premises for about an hour scouring the area. No police arrived the entire time. After they left, my son and his friend gathered some courage and went to the barn, and that's when they saw the white goo. My son was going to stay the night, but the entire thing freaked him out, and he didn't like the idea of being in the countryside with that thing running around. My son said the rafters to the barn were like 12 feet high, and the way the dad described it, it was hunched over, and an arm dangled down over the rafter above, so it was no small thing. Now, if it was blasted by a gun, you'd think the cops would look into it. Nothing. The dad was questioned, but that was it. No repercussions for shooting someone, regardless it being Utah and such. Questions or form or something would be filled out, I'd think, but what do I know? The hazmat-suited guys had collected something. My son thinks it was the white goo. Whatever it was, the powers that be had to have this thing on radar to have this type of response in less than 30 minutes, where this place was. My 2 cents, a DNA dumb experiment escaped, or was purposefully let loose in the wild and monitored to see what it does. But again, what do I know? Be me, camping alone in the national forest on the Washington and Idaho border. Spent a lot of time around here, very comfortable in the area. Way the fuck up a fire road, nobody around. Place I'm camping was well frequented a few months ago, but know for a fact that nobody's around anymore. Cooked dinner in Cedar Grove, comfy but dark. Set up big tarp to sleep under. Open on one side, roomy, pretty much only good to keep the rain off me. Notice the wind has stopped completely. It gets really quiet. Get that bad feeling. That feeling. Nope. Pack shit up in the dark. Put fire out, leave. Drive down mountain. Gonna find a fire road and just camp there. Get creeping feeling that my fire isn't all the way out. People will know it was me if a fire starts. Damn it. Go back to meadow. Bad feeling returns. Park. Turn high beams on, pointing into the forest. Going through the woods. Reminds me of every UFO movie ever. Trees are throwing weird shadows. Nerves are getting to me. Find fire spot. It's cold. Really unsettling feeling now. Notice metallic smell. Kind of like copper and sulfur, but less of a smell and more like a gaseous feeling in my sinuses. Wind stops. Everything is completely silent. Look around. Trees look weird. Look at car. Looks like it's getting further away from me. But I'm standing still, and it's standing still. Nope. Sprint to car. Drive down mountain. Feel like a pussy. Decide to sleep in car, in the forest, a little closer to civilization. 4 a.m. Woken up to weird fucking vibration. There's nothing in my car that should be vibrating besides my phone, which is in my hand. Nope. In and out of sleep for an hour. Finally wake up, drive up mountain, drink coffee, and watch sunrise. Haven't camped there alone since. Same forest. Worked and lived in this forest on and off for a few years. Often, I was the guy who was driving up at night or other silly times. I would work often all day and then have to drive for parts or gas at a central location. Location was just inside the national forest, but on a road with some houses and cabins on it. Locals would put up signs saying, Area 52, Alien Containment, or shit to be funny. One local builds pic-related on his hill, overlooking a turn in the road. It was always off-putting. My first time going by it, guy I'm driving up with says, there are 7 friends on the hill. What the fuck? He explains that if you say it out loud, there will always be 7, and they won't move. Ask what happens if you don't say it. Just say it every time, dude. Fast forward a year or two. 3 a.m. Coming back from supply place. Already hallucinating kinda bad, but roll down window to keep myself cold and alert. Work truck has shitty crank windows, having to fuck with it. Coming up on the turn. See movement out of peripheral. Lots of deer in the forest, sometimes moose. Can't risk smoking a deer at 2 a.m. in the work truck. Whip head over. Look, nothing there. Look back at top of hill. Get weird feeling. Didn't count, but there definitely aren't that many figures up there as usual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Drive a little. Maybe I'm at a weird angle. Still 6. Oh fuck. One has longer arms than normal, and they're held up. Did it always have that? Thoroughly creeped out. Punch it down the hill through the woods. Keep getting glimpses of something off to my side. But when I turn my head, I don't see anything. It feels like something's running parallel to me. On a dirt road, but still get up to 40 miles an hour. Sinking feeling in gut. Still getting weird peripherals. Finally make it to a paved road. Punch it. Stop getting movement and peripherals once I hit a farm. Get back to camp. Check phone for pic related I took a few weeks earlier. Don't sleep that night. Never forget to say the saying after that. Working as a camp counselor for a scout camp a few summers ago. Last week is a large canoe trip with all the kids. Our lead guide falls sick and has to go to the hospital. Instead of canceling the trip, all the counselors decide that we can hire a guide from the nearest town. Find a guy in town who was reluctant, but we managed to convince him by paying more than offered and threw in a 24-pack of beer. Day of the trip comes, and he arrives with a rifle in tow. We try to convince him to leave it because we've got kids here and we don't want them scared as to why we need a gun. This is Canada, so guns aren't too common, especially with city kids. He says it's for defense, and how he knows this place better than us, and it would be wise to have it just in case. We'd already paid him, and he had already drank some of the beer, so we just said fuck it, and just have the gun out of sight from any of the kids. The canoe trip is fairly uneventful for the first 2 days. We're following the river and stopping at various areas along the way. Day 3 is really hot, and the kids and counselors are tired earlier than anticipated. We decide to stop on a large island in the mid-afternoon and make plans to camp on it. When we get ashore, we see some rock formations that look prearranged, almost artistic in a crude sort of way. We unload the 6 canoes we have and set up camp. Some of the kids decide to wander into the forest and come back screaming. They found bones all over the forest floor, scattered in all manner of places. The guide we hired looks nervous, steely eyes looking around at the rocks, and goes into the woods to see the bones. A couple other kids go on the other side of where he went in and find those hut sort of arrangements made out of branches, kind of like the ones homeless people will make out in the woods. The guide comes out of the woods and finds us counselors. Tells us we shouldn't stay here and it's not safe. Ask why, but he won't divulge. Tell him it's too hot to pack everything back up and continue down the river, and everyone is too tired. He warns us that this island belongs to someone or something, and we shouldn't be here. We laugh it off, because if it belongs to someone, they'd surely be out and ready to talk to us to get us off almost as soon as we arrived. And we'd been here for around 2 hours and no one had approached. He looks at us with contempt and goes to lay down in his canoe. A few hours later, it's sunset, and everyone is really relaxed. Some of the kids have decided to explore the island a bit more, and others are swimming. The other counselors and I are looking over the map and planning the next day. Realize the island we were on is huge and stretches on for a good several kilometers. We're going over this when we hear an ungodly scream from the forest. Like an animal, wet and visceral, but different. Kids come screaming out of the forest, stammering that something was in there watching them and throwing stones at them. One of the kids threw a stone back, and that's when the scream happened. The guide hears this, runs up to us with his gun, and motions all of us to get to the canoes. Another scream rips through the air. Guide yells at us to move now, or face the consequences. He goes towards the forest. We all scramble to the canoes, trying to make sure the kids are all present. We wait as we see the guide go into the forest. It's quiet for I don't know how long. Suddenly, a shot reverberates throughout the area. Then another. Then the guide comes running full tilt out of the forest, screaming at us, "Go! Go! Go!" We get in the canoes and wait for him to catch up before pushing off. As we start to paddle around to the side away from the shore, several rocks come flying out of the woods and land on the shore and into the water near us. We paddle hard to get to the other side of the river and find some sort of landing. We demand to know what the guide saw in those woods. tells us it was someone's territory, just not a person. Lame ending. Summer 2018. I'm deep sea fishing with my uncle because he didn't have long to live at the time. Dude smoked like a chimney most of the time I'd known him, and they'd found growth on his lungs. We're about 40 to 50 miles from the coast. We made a lengthy trip on a small boat he'd had since apparently 1986. Cast out a good distance from the boat. No clouds, no real choppy waters. Then we feel this object right below us collide. It shakes the boat hard enough that the cooler with the beer and bait cooler get knocked free and go overboard. My uncle starts screaming, "What the fuck was that shit? Fucking hell." We see this long, thick shape dart out, just barely visible underneath the water. It's just a long, skinny, dark shape. It disappears into the sea, and we don't see it again. Uncle decides we're done, because there's no use in being out there with no beer or bait. Tells me if we had either, we'd wait to see it come back. Takes about an hour to get back to the docks and load the boat on the truck. My uncle asks me if I saw its head. I say no. Tells me that's good because he did, and he was scared shitless by it. Says it looked like a dinosaur mixed with the devil. Tell him all I saw was it being a thick, snake-like body. I guess he told one of his fishing buddies about it, and all they talked about was how great its head would look on a fireplace mantle. Look up various marine reptiles and aquatic dinosaurs, but nothing really fit. This happened about 40 to 50 miles northwest off the coast of Maine. I still don't know what I saw. 18. Go kayaking because this girl I was dating was into outdoor shit. We go to this rural area of Connecticut to get our rental kayaks. She chooses this waterway that leads up to the Barn Island Wildlife Refuge. Just a relaxed afternoon as we make our way upriver to the refuge. About a good 100 yards in front of us, we both notice this tall grass that's close to the shore, thrashing violently. We just watch it while paddling past it, thinking maybe it's a snapping turtle or maybe something larger like a coyote. We have a big problem with coyotes in the rural areas of southern New England, so that's what made me think it's one of those. We see instead this massive black wolf jumping out into the water with a big-ass bass in its mouth. Big wolf. And I mean big. Motherfucker had a head that could easily crush mine if it bit me. We see this thing seamlessly crawl out onto the other end of the bank. Then we notice something about how it's eating. It's holding the bass like it has hands. It's after that we're taken aback when this fucking thing stands up. Upright. And runs over a hill and out of our sight. Never told anyone since we're both flabbergasted by basically seeing a wolf man. Used to live in a house from 2005 to 2019 that was basically haunted. The house was made up of 3 floors, each one a separate apartment. Well, first floor would say they hear things sometimes. It was by and large the second and third floor apartments where activity was noticeable. Living on the 3rd floor, we would hear an unintelligible conversation down on the porch. Almost always the same thing. 2 male voices would start normally before it erupts into a full argument that peaks, then stops. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway and never pulling out or anyone getting out. The bathroom seemed to be where you could hear voices conversing in the closet beside the sink. 3-year-old cousin would talk to an imaginary girl named Cindy, whom she'd eventually become terrified of because of bad things Cindy wanted her to do. 2nd floor seemed to be where the activity peaked, as the landlord really struggled to rent that one out for longer than 7 to 8 months at a time, with some exceptions. Ironically enough, when the 2nd floor apartment was completely vacant, the activity died down considerably. I used to have a neighbor down there named Jed, who, towards the end of his tenancy, slept outside because he didn't like anything about the apartment. He never elaborated, just said the place had too much creepy stuff happen for his liking. There was also a family who lived there for a while because they had a Section 8 voucher the landlord readily accepted. The mother told my mom about things that happened down there, notably how some nights a shadowy man would come into her son's room and told them vile things like how their parents will kill each other. I once experienced a voice on a baby monitor when helping my mom babysit our neighbor's youngest kids. The voice sounded like the Wicked Witch after a meth binge and smoking 10 packs of cigarettes a day for 50 years, saying,
"You little bitch, I'll kill you,"
towards the infant daughter. Be me, 9 years old, at Grandma's house, playing with some toy cars I had. In the back room of the house, playing some weird game where I had them race each other and then fight. Happen to look up while playing. Look past the open door and see the dark dining room. See something yellow under the dining room table in the darkness. Realize it's a pair of yellow eyes. Eyes look around the room and all under the table. Suddenly make direct eye contact with me. Awful feeling, like I'm gonna die. Begin screaming for my grandma, who comes rushing past the dining room table. As soon as my grandma made it to the table, the eyes shut and didn't come back. Try my best to explain to my grandma what happened. Still have no idea what the hell that was. My grandma had no pets, and I've never seen or had another experience like that to this day. An afternoon of winter 2010. In a woods, when suddenly everything goes quiet. Whispers break the silence. Then a howl echoes through the valley. A strong wind starts blowing. Feels like it's actually charging at me like some mad animal. Grass rustling like crazy. Wind grows so intense I have to protect my face with my forearms. As suddenly as it came, the wind ceases and silence takes over the forest again. Looking around, still astonished by what just happened, when I spot a ball of light flying down the mountain to my left. It emanates light, but doesn't look like it's made of fire. It's pure white in color, and leaves a faint trail as it floats around me. It's also distinctively solid as it zigzags through the trunks. Stops a few feet away from me. Can now hear a low-pitch hum and constant sizzling coming from it. Initially just curious, but now I'm overtaken by dread. I feel like this thing is waiting to jump at me. Even if I think of escaping, persuading my body to move is another matter entirely. Just close my eyes and start reciting Psalm 23:4. Put my heart at peace with dying, hoping to open my eyes to see any sight but that thing. Gone. The ball of light had disappeared completely. At first I suspect it's all a dream, since I don't feel that sense of fear anymore either. Just start to walk back to my house, but then I subconsciously acknowledge the reality of the situation and begin to bolt away. I've got an orb story. August 2019. Going to airport. Catch a train to airport early at 7 a.m. Looking out over the rail yard, listening to podcast. Across the way, there's some scaffolding. Notice what looks like a plastic bag drifting down from above the scaffolding. This was a Sunday, so no construction workers. But cast it off as just a bag. Nothing else to do, so keep watching it. As it gets closer to the ground level, it starts folding in on itself. Before it gets to the bottom, it shifts its trajectory to going left along the scaffolding while keeping a steady pace, still folding in on itself. What the fuck? It gets to the end of the scaffolding and goes back the way it came. Literally stops for a second as if it turned around. Keep watching as it retraces its path back up from the area and into the sky, and drifts behind a skyscraper. The second I lose sight of it, I see a second one appear further in the sky. Second one drifts, still doing that folding, floating thing. Then in a flash of light, like a sparkler, it disappeared in the bright blue sky. B-22, 1996. Living in Georgia, late at night. Me and my stoner buddy Paul are at 7-Eleven, getting snacks for when we get lit later up that night. Decide we're gonna get gas because the tank was getting a bit low anyway. As I'm pumping the car, I look across the road to where there's this field. It's about maybe 200 yards before you get to the tree line. Start seeing there's some movement out there. This is still about 6:30 p.m. in July, so there's still some daylight and it's easy to make out the details of the tree line. Start seeing that there's this tall figure. It stops, just standing there for about 10 to 12 seconds. When I say this fucker is tall, I mean it had to be 7 feet or over. Figure turns around and walks back off into the woods. Be me around 2007, visiting some relatives with my mom. Cousins, aunt, and uncle all live out in the country between Ohio and Pennsylvania. It's getting late into the night, and me and my cousins are doing bumpkin stuff like shooting at raccoons with BB guns. We're walking around the woods, looking for raccoons to shoot at, aiming flashlights. Suddenly my cousin Eric says he hears some noise in the bushes. Shine our flashlight when we see this giant fox head. I've seen foxes before, and I know how big they're supposed to be. This was twice the size of what a fox should be. It doesn't do anything but stare at us until it disappears back into the bushes and runs off. We're not scared, more confused by the whole thing. It's Ohio, it's just a furry. Be me, about a year ago. Move out of my roommate's place because one of them flies off the handle at the smallest thing, and arguing with them is a no-win situation where even trying to defuse the situation ends in screaming and yelling louder. Also like talking about how much he suffers daily, and everyone abandons him anyway. Gee, I wonder why. Also had a habit of calling everyone else a narcissist. Spent a few nights living out of my car. Not the worst thing ever, but mildly uncomfortable. Usually find parking lots to pull into and not get noticed by cops. Find a post office parking lot to pull into. Sleep a few hours there before going to a nearby YMCA to shower before work. Not able to really sleep all that much when I see something in the sky. Initially think nothing of it, since the city airport is about 6 miles north. But I can make out it's larger than an average plane. Craft is huge, cigar-shaped thing with large red light at the center. It's just gliding slowly up in the sky. Craft suddenly has its light turn white, and I get this immediate bad feeling. I peel off, break speeding laws, and I don't stop till I'm 6 hours away and several towns over. Got a couple of stories. Be me, UK friend living in Germany with girlfriend. Winter of 2023, walking my dog in the forest at like 6 p.m, so sun is already set. Come to this clearing with a bench for hikers and a road to some farmhouses. See this candlelight flickering like 50 meters in the distance. It was windy and cold as shit. No one except me dumb enough to walk their dog. Turn off flashlight, cause kinda intrigued, .png. Candlelight comes to about 40 meters, then goes back to original distance. Happens a few times, like it was beckoning me to follow. Shit was hovering or something, not like someone was holding it and walking back and forth. Obviously not gonna follow that shit. Walk along my usual route, still have light in sight. Light floats up deeper into the woods. Another one. Walking my dog again, same woods. Summer of this year, like 2 months ago. Walk along this forest path next to a stream super close to a road. Dog stops and looks at something, so I take a look too. Looks like some animal standing on 2 legs and looking right at me and my dog. Not even that far off, maybe 20 to 30 meters. Reddish looking fur, skin, and 2 yellowish red eyes. Maybe like 1.5 meters tall, just looking at us. Dog loses interest, so we continue walking the path up the hill, while keeping that thing in my peripheral. Look at it again when nearly on top of the hill, where I'd lose sight of it. Its eyes followed me too. I can see it's not a deer, and definitely standing on 2 legs. Continue up the hill, and lose it from sight. I have no idea what the hell that thing was. Didn't notice any peculiar smell or feeling, and I haven't seen it again. If I didn't have my dog with me, I'd have gone closer, but I didn't want her to get hurt. Lived literally a few feet from a massive cemetery by a river. I could walk there from the house and be at the cemetery in 5 to 6 minutes. So, it shouldn't be too shocking, the entire neighborhood told plenty of spooky stories about creepy shit. Anyway, I'm around 6 or 7. Dad's in the hospital after an accident at work led to him falling back first off a 10-foot ladder with nothing to really break the fall, so suffice to say, he got pretty fucked up from it. One day, my mom is asleep in her bedroom, having worked second shift the night before, while my grandmother watched me. Usually the hospital called if things were going good with his recovery. It's about 11 in the morning, not too hot for July, when, out of desperation, I was praying to God that my dad lives. He wasn't a very good father in retrospect, but as a kid I didn't think or care about that. After praying, I head down the hall into the kitchen to grab a juice box from the fridge, walk back into the spare room where I was watching TV and made this prayer. Turn in to see this decrepit-looking creature thing in a long black cloak, with these long, bony-ass fingers. Creature thing says in this raspy voice, "God won't grant your wishes." Out of sheer terror, I bolt into my parents' room, wake my mom up, and babble to her the way a 6-year-old does about seeing something scary. We go back, and there's nothing there. Mom is a devout Christian, so first thing she does is use blessed olive oil, runs it over the windows and doors while saying, "In Jesus' name, you are not allowed in here." Still have the image of that thing in my head if I think about it enough. In later years, I'm convinced that creature was from the cemetery. 2006, 19th birthday in Toronto. I came face to face with some kind of non-human entity in a pub. My friends and I entered a random pub we encountered to have some drinks and food before we went to a party. My friends entered first, and I went next door to a store to get cigarettes. I entered the pub, and as soon as I got about halfway to where my friends were seated, suddenly everything in the pub went quiet and slowed down to maybe 10% of normal speed. My attention was tunnel vision, focused on a guy heading towards the door. As we passed each other no more than 6 feet apart, he was looking right at me and smiling. He had very pale skin, almost albino, and his teeth were all very small and sharp. The whites of his eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were a dark green-brown. He was dressed in a long dark coat, and his hair was long tight braids. Everything slowed down to the point where it felt like he was just staring at me smiling while he walked out of the door for minutes. And as he exited, the world around me snapped back into motion and sound. I was so stunned by it, I immediately asked my friends what the hell just happened, and if any of them saw what I just saw. They all laughed, and I was just forced to shake it off. All these years later, I remember this experience like it happened yesterday, and can picture the creature's face with perfect clarity. I know this thing wasn't human, and I feel as if I was the only one who saw it, and it knew I was observing it. Alright, there you have it. There's another episode of 4chan Stories. This one was really awesome because I actually found a fresh thread with, obviously, paranormal and cryptid stories. It was really nice reading some actually kind of spooky stories as opposed to the usual schizo posts, so I really hope you guys enjoyed. I had a bunch of fun reading these. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.